Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You want to read a book, just one simple book. But you cannot buy it, you cannot download it, and you cannot even find it easily. In the 1400s, books were extremely rare, and most people never owned a single book in their entire life. The reason is simple, but also surprising. Every book had to be written by hand, slowly and carefully, word by word, line by line. Now picture a quiet room inside a monastery. A monk sits alone at a wooden table. He bends over pages for hours, sometimes all day, carefully copying each letter. This work was called manuscript copying. A manuscript means a book written by hand. It sounds peaceful, but it was also very hard and very slow work. One page could take many hours to complete, and a full book could take months or even years. Because everything depended on human hands, mistakes were common. A word might be written wrong, a sentence might be skipped, or a whole page might be missing. So books were not only slow to create, but also not always perfect. And because they took so much time and effort, they were very expensive. Only rich people could afford them, like kings, powerful churches, or wealthy families. For ordinary people, books were almost impossible to access. If you wanted to learn something new, you had to listen to someone who already knew it. There were no school books for everyone, and there were no public libraries like today. Knowledge moved slowly, almost like a whisper traveling from one person to another. Think about this carefully. If an important idea was written in a single book, it could stay in one place for many years. It might never travel far, and sometimes it could even disappear forever. This was a quiet and limited world, a world where knowledge was locked away, and most people stood outside, unable to reach it. But problems like this do not last forever. Somewhere in Europe, a man began to think differently. He looked at this slow world and imagined something faster, something better. His name was Johannes Gutenberg, and he was about to change the future of knowledge forever. At first, handwritten books seemed like a good system. Monks were careful, patient, and deeply focused. They believed they were doing important work, especially when copying religious texts. But as time passed, the limits of this system became impossible to ignore. The biggest problem was speed. Imagine a world where one book takes a year to make. Now imagine 10 people want that same book. It could take 10 years, or even longer. Knowledge simply could not keep up with human curiosity. People wanted to learn more, but the system could not support that growth. There was also the problem of consistency. Every copy of a book could be slightly different. One monk might make a small mistake, and the next person would copy that mistake again. Over time, the original message could slowly change. It was like a quiet game of telephone, where each version becomes less accurate than the last. Another issue was physical exhaustion. Copying books was not just slow, it was tiring. Monks often worked long hours in poor light. Their eyes hurt, their hands ached, and their bodies became stiff. When people are tired, mistakes happen more often. So the system was not only slow, it was also fragile. And then there was demand. Europe was changing. Cities were growing, trade was increasing, and more people wanted education. Universities were beginning to appear, and students needed books. Not one or two, but many. The old system simply could not handle this rising demand. Think of it like this. Imagine trying to supply books to a whole city, but each one must be written by hand. No matter how hard people worked, it would never be enough. The gap between what people needed and what they could get kept growing wider. Some people may have felt this problem deeply, even if they could not explain it. They lived in a time where knowledge existed, but it was out of reach. It was close, but not accessible. This is often how big changes begin. Not with a sudden invention, but with a growing pressure. A system that works until it doesn't anymore. And somewhere in this changing world, one man began to look at the problem in a new way. He did not want to copy books faster with his hands. He wanted to change the system completely. His name was still Johannes Gutenberg, and he was about to take a very risky step. Johannes Gutenberg was not a monk. He was not a traditional scholar either. He was a craftsman, someone who worked with tools, metal, and machines. And this made him different. Instead of asking, How can we copy faster? He asked a more dangerous question. What if we don't copy by hand at all? This idea was bold, almost strange for his time. Gutenberg grew up in the city of Mainz, in Germany. He learned skills like metalworking and engraving. These skills would later become very important. At that time, people already used simple printing methods, like carving words into wood blocks. Then they pressed the wood onto paper. But this method had a big problem. You had to carve a whole page again and again for every new text. It was slow and not flexible. Gutenberg wanted something better. He started to imagine small pieces instead of whole pages. Each piece would hold one letter. You could move these letters, arrange them, and reuse them again and again. This idea is called movable type. Movable means you can move it. Type means letters used for printing. This simple idea was actually very powerful. But having an idea is one thing. Making it work is another. Gutenberg faced many challenges. First, he needed the right material. The letters had to be strong, but also small and clear. Wood was not good enough, so he experimented with metal. After many tries, he found a mix of metals that worked well. Then came the ink. Normal ink used for writing was too light. It did not stick well to metal. So Gutenberg had to create a new kind of ink, thicker and darker. And finally, he needed a machine. He looked at a common tool used for making wine, the wine press. It used pressure to squeeze juice from grapes. Gutenberg saw something else. He saw a way to press paper onto inked letters. This was not one invention. It was many small ideas coming together. But there was also risk. Gutenberg spent a lot of money on his experiments. He borrowed money and worked in secret. If he failed, he could lose everything. People might laugh at him. Or worse, they might not understand his idea at all. Still, he continued. Because he believed in something bigger. A world where books were not rare. A world where knowledge could move freely. And slowly, after years of effort, his machine began to work. Now, something incredible started to happen. After years of trial and error, Johannes Gutenberg was no longer just experimenting. He was building a real machine. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Let's imagine how it worked. First, Gutenberg created many small metal letters. Each letter was separate. Each one could be used again and again. He placed these letters into a frame, forming words, then sentences, then full pages. This frame held everything tightly in place. Then came the ink. He carefully rolled thick, dark ink over the metal letters. The surface became covered, but only on the raised parts. This step needed precision. Too much ink would blur the letters. Too little ink would make them hard to read. Next came the most powerful part, the press. Gutenberg placed a sheet of paper over the inked letters. Then he used a machine, inspired by a wine press, to push the paper down evenly. The pressure transferred the ink from the metal letters onto the paper. And just like that, a page was printed. Clear, fast, repeatable. This was something the world had never truly seen before. Now here is the magic. After printing one page, Gutenberg could remove the paper, add a new sheet, and press again. The same page could be copied many times, quickly, and with almost no mistakes. When he needed a new page, he did not start from zero. He simply rearranged the letters. This saved an unbelievable amount of time. What once took months could now take days. What once required many people could now be done by a small team. It was not just faster, it was smarter. But building the machine was not only about ideas. It required teamwork and money. Gutenberg worked with partners and investors. One important partner was Johann Fust, who helped fund the project. Without financial support, the machine might never have been completed. Still, the pressure was high. If this machine failed, Gutenberg would lose everything. His money, his reputation, and his years of work. But if it succeeded, it could change the entire system of knowledge. And soon, the moment of truth arrived. The machine was ready. Now it needed to prove itself. When Johannes Gutenberg finally used his machine at full power, the results were amazing. For the first time in history, books could be produced quickly and in large numbers. Pages looked clean, clear, and almost identical. This was something handwritten copies could never truly achieve. One of his most famous works was the Gutenberg Bible. It was beautiful, detailed, and carefully designed. Many people could not believe it was printed by a machine. It still looked like a traditional handwritten book, but it was faster to produce. This moment should have been a perfect success. But real life is rarely that simple. Behind the scenes, problems were growing. Gutenberg had borrowed a lot of money to build his press. His investor, Johannes Gutenberg, wanted his money back. Printing was working, but it was not yet making enough profit quickly. Tension began to rise between the two men. Finally, things broke apart. Gutenberg took Gutenberg to court. He claimed that Gutenberg could not repay the debt. And in the end, the court decided against Gutenberg. He lost his equipment, his workshop, and control of his printing business. Imagine that for a moment. You spend years building something revolutionary, and then you lose it. Gutenberg did not become rich from his invention. He did not fully enjoy the success he created. His story is not just about invention. It is also about loss. But here is the important part. Even though Gutenberg lost control, the idea could not be stopped. Gutenberg and his new partner continued printing. Other people learned the method. Printers began to appear in different cities. The machine was no longer just Gutenberg's. It was becoming the world's. This is something we see many times in history. The person who starts a revolution is not always the one who benefits the most. But their idea moves forward, growing beyond them. So while Gutenberg faced personal failure, his invention was quietly spreading. And soon, it would reach far beyond one city, beyond one country, into all of Europe. After the early struggles, something powerful began to happen. Printing did not stay in one place. It moved. The idea of movable type was too useful, too efficient to remain hidden. Printers who learned the method began traveling to other cities. They carried the knowledge with them, like a quiet wave spreading across Europe. Within a few decades, printing presses appeared in many places. Cities like Venice, Paris, and London quickly adopted this new technology. Each new press meant more books, more readers, and more ideas. Before this, books were rare objects. Now, they were becoming products. This was a huge change. Book prices began to fall. Not immediately, but slowly. As printing became more common, more people could afford books. Merchants, students, and even some ordinary workers started to buy and read. Reading was no longer only for the rich. It was becoming part of everyday life. Universities grew faster because students finally had access to the same materials. Teachers could share knowledge more easily. Ideas could be tested, discussed, and improved. And something even more important happened. Information started to move faster than ever before. A new idea, written in one city, could be printed many times and travel across countries in a short time. This had never been possible before. Knowledge was no longer trapped in one place. It was alive. It was moving. This also changed religion and science. For example, new religious ideas could spread quickly and reach thousands of people. In science, thinkers could share discoveries, and others could build on them. Progress became faster. But not everyone was happy. Some leaders felt afraid. They worried about losing control. If anyone could print ideas, then dangerous or critical opinions could also spread. Printing was not just a tool for knowledge. It was also a tool for change. Still, the process could not be stopped. Once people saw the power of printing, there was no going back to the slow world of handwritten books. The number of books grew rapidly, from a few thousand to millions. And with every new book, the world became a little more connected, a little more informed. The ripple was becoming a wave. By the late 1400s and early 1500s, Europe was no longer the same. The printing press had done something quiet but powerful. It changed how people think. Before printing, knowledge was controlled by a small number of people, mostly the church and the elite. But now, books were appearing in many more places. Not everywhere yet, but enough to start a change. And when more people can read, more people can think for themselves. This is where everything begins to shift. Students in different cities could study the same texts. Scholars could agree or disagree based on shared information. Ideas became something people could exchange, not just receive. This helped create a period we now call the Renaissance, which means rebirth. It was a rebirth of learning, art, and science, where people became curious again about the world and about human life. Printing allowed these ideas to travel far beyond one city, reaching people who would never have seen them before. Then came another major turning point. A man named Martin Luther wrote his thoughts about religion. In the past, his ideas might have stayed local, known only by a small group. But with printing, his words spread quickly across Europe. This led to the Protestant Reformation, a huge transformation in religious life. It showed clearly that printing was not just about books, it was about power, belief, and change. A similar shift happened in science. Thinkers could now share discoveries and learn from each other more easily. Knowledge was no longer lost so easily, because it could be printed many times and stored in different places. This created a stronger base for learning, where each new idea could build on the last one. Over time, this helped lead to what we call the scientific revolution, a period of rapid progress and new understanding. But if we step back for a moment, the story feels almost simple. It started with a basic problem. Books were too slow to make. And one man chose to solve that problem in a completely new way. Johannes Gutenberg did not just create a machine, he opened a door. He allowed knowledge to move, to grow, and to reach people who had never had access before. Today, when you read a book, scroll on your phone, or learn something new online, you are continuing that same journey. From handwritten pages in quiet rooms to a world full of information, this is the story of how knowledge became something shared. And once it started, it never stopped.